The other thing that I often tell people, I had someone joke at a seminar once and he said, can the trust fix the dysfunction in the next generation? And I think we all know the answer to that. The answer is no. There's only so much a legal document is going to do, right? We can't fix necessarily people who have addiction or people who have spending problems or people who have all these other problems, but you can put guardrails in place so that if you did have a beneficiary that had an addiction or had a spending problem or was involved in a lawsuit, where the trustee and your board can shut down distributions or make sure that they get the help they need, make sure they get the education they need. But a lot of the preparation needs to happen. If you're going to create a legacy plan, it needs to happen while you're alive. You need to train up the next generation. The legal document can't fix what you failed to do during your lifetime. You're listening to Legacy Maker Podcast with Kristina Hess. Clear guidance for protecting your wealth, empowering your family, and creating a lasting legacy of generational impact. Legacy Maker, let's go. I don't think any wealth builder wants the next generation to squander their wealth. Yet statistically, that's what happens more often than not. 70% of the wealth is lost by the next generation and 90% by generation 3. A multi-generational trust structure can help wealth endure and cross generations, but it's not guaranteed and it's not automatic, and it can often fail. Hi, I'm Kristina Hess, and welcome to another episode of Legacy Maker. I'm your host, and I'm an estate planning attorney with over 25 years of experience, but I am not your attorney. And this is my legal disclaimer. This is for educational purposes only. I'm not providing tax advice, legal advice, fiduciary advice. All right. So what is a multi-generational trust? A multi-generational trust is a trust that answers 3 questions across time. Who controls, who benefits, and under what rules? If you answer those questions correctly with the right trust structure, you could set up a trust that endures for a very long time. So let me tell you a tale of 2 families. So the first family is the Smith family. Now, the Smith family, mom and dad created wealth, and they set up a revocable trust, not a dynasty trust, not a multi-generational trust. When mom and dad died, they had 3 children. So the trust went outright to the 3 children once they were over the age of 30 years old. So in this situation, when mom and dad died, the 3 children inherited the wealth outright and free of trust. So Johnny, for example, Johnny Smith Jr., he took his inheritance, he commingled it with his spouse, and then a few years later, they got divorced. Now Johnny, so he lost half of it in the divorce. And then Johnny liked to travel. He liked to spend money. He was out of work for a while. And so he quickly burned through his trust. By year 7, his inheritance was gone. Now Johnny's sister Sally, she was a good steward. So Sally invested her money. She was a physician. She ran a successful practice. She and her husband had built wealth through real estate. But the problem in Sally's situation is when mom and dad Smith inheritance came to them, she received it outright free of trust, which means it was added to her and her husband's taxable estate. So suddenly, the millions of dollars that she inherited from her family added to her taxable estate. And so there was a lost opportunity. Had her parents set up the trust as a multi-generational trust, it could have been exempt up until mom and dad Smith's estate exemption, which in the year of 2026, every family, every married couple can pass $30 million tax-free to the next generation. Had they set it up in a trust that preserved their estate exemption, there's also what's called a generation skipping transfer tax exemption. So had they set it up correctly, all of that wealth could have passed to Sally outside of her taxable estate so that when she died, it would go to the Smith's grandchildren tax-free. Now, Sally and her husband are facing their children are facing a potential 40% tax when they die because mom and dad set up an outright trust. So this is why multi-generational trusts can be very valuable. The first one is to preserve the generation skipping transfer tax and to have tax exemptions that don't run out over time. That's number one. The other thing is you can provide asset protection in the trust. So in the example of Johnny, he got divorced because the inheritance went outright. It was outside of the protective structure of the trust. And so the protection of the trust was gone. Johnny got his inheritance. He commingled it. Johnny could do whatever he wanted with it. He traveled. He didn't work. Yada, yada. The money was gone. With a protective trust, the family can put guardrails. You can have distribution standards. It's within the protective structure of the trust, so it can provide asset protection, tax savings, governance, avoid family disputes, and provide for wealth to endure across the generations. So I've already alluded to some of the mistakes, but let's talk about the three biggest mistakes that can cause a multi-generation trust to fail. The first one is who controls the trust? The trustee. Now, oftentimes parents will choose the most responsible of their children to be the trustee. And this could work at times, but more often than not, you've got multiple siblings, you've got one sibling with all the control, and they don't understand that they're a fiduciary. Even if the attorney explains to them, you're a fiduciary, you have a duty of care, you have a duty of loyalty, you have a duty to do an accounting, you have all these duties. The attorney explains that to them. Oftentimes children will take license, or there's sibling rivalry once the parents are gone. All the unresolved childhood issues come up, the mistrust. It can lead to a disaster. And so sometimes parents will say, well, I don't want one child having all the control. I don't want them to think that I had a favorite. So let's just make 2 or 3 of them as co-trustees. Again, that's not a good idea either, because then they're going to have inherited conflict with no means of resolving it, and or they could be in stalemate or deadlock, or one of them ends up doing all of the work anyway, and the other ones can hinder the administrative process. So that's one of the biggest problems, is who you choose to control the trust. The second one is lack of distribution standards. So sometimes people won't necessarily have the trust go outright at age 30, but they'll just have no guidance for the trustee, or they'll have too much guidance. So they might have a distribution standard, provide for their care and support, or give them so much per year. This could interfere with asset protection. Or if the trustee has sole discretion, which is strong protection, then the trustee's got all this power, but no guidance. And that can lead to conflict between the trustee and the beneficiary. Now, the third big problem is once you're gone, if you set up a trust that is going to last for generations or for a period of time, it's irrevocable. It has to be irrevocable. So when the parents are gone, the trust is irrevocable. If you set up a dynasty trust now, it's irrevocable. But once it's irrevocable, who can change it? The good news is there are ways that these trusts can be changed, but you'd be surprised how many legacy trusts that I've seen where the attorney didn't build in any flexibility. Or if you're in a jurisdiction like California, even if the trust says that you can decant the trust decanting statute is so restrictive that doesn't give you that much flexibility. So the 3 problems are who controls the trust, what are the distribution standards, what's the cash flow, and how do you resolve conflict? And lack of planning along those mechanisms can be a big mistake. So let's talk now about the legacy maker framework. So what's a better way to set this up? Let's talk about the trustee and jurisdiction first, actually, because if you want a multi-generational trust, then you want to be in a jurisdiction that allows trust to endure beyond a certain period of time. In California, for example, once the grantor is gone, the trust can only continue for 90 years. Now, that's not so bad. That could be 2.5, depends on when the kids have kids, but it could be up to 3 generations. But you could easily go to Utah or Wyoming for 1,000 years. Those trusts can endure for 1,000 years. Now that's a real dynasty. Nevada is 365 years. So there's other jurisdictions that have a longer rule against perpetuities. So that's a good way to set up the trust. The other thing besides the jurisdiction, this will help solve the trustee problem, because if you're going to be in Nevada or Wyoming, you need to have a trustee who's in Nevada or Wyoming. And the good news is there's very good trust companies in both of those states that can serve as your trustee. Now, some parents will say to me, but I want my kids to have some control. I trust my family more than I trust some third party. Understandably so. So you can do what's called a directive trust, where you can have, there's multiple duties of a trustee. There's administration, there's managing the assets, the investment part of it, and there's distribution to the beneficiaries. So you, for strong asset protection, could have the third party trustee as the manager of the assets. You could have them in all three: the manager, the distribution, and the administration. Or you could say, okay, my daughter could be the investment trustee at age 35. If she's over 35, any beneficiary could manage the investments. Other parents don't like that. They want the financial advisor involved. So there's controls that you can build in here. Another good option is you have a professional trustee, but then you might have a board of trustees, people that you know and trust, and you have a chairperson of the board, and they would be the ones that would decide when the beneficiaries get the distributions. And you're going to have given them, this goes to point number 2, you're going to have given them a philosophy around distributions, discretionary guidelines, a letter of wishes. It can either be in the trust itself or it can be outside of the trust. And you could say, hey, Board of Trustees, refer to my letter of wishes, refer to my discretionary distribution guidelines. And this is where you can say things like, what's your philosophy around money? Most people want their next generation to work and to be productive members of society. They don't want them just to receive an inheritance, sit back, do nothing, and get a check. Now, maybe once they've already proved themselves to be hardworking and industrious and they're older, maybe that would be okay if they were nearing retirement. But most people want, and beneficiaries actually benefit from working and having purpose. I was reading a story the other day. I won't mention any names, but a very wealthy individual said before his kids could receive any money, they had to work at a full-time job, even if it was minimum wage, for at least a year, and they had to go through certain steps to show that they understood the value of work, to show that they had philanthropy, to show that they were going to be good stewards of what they received before they received any money. Now, those are soft standards, but that's where your board of trustee comes in. The board could be people in your universe, people that know you, know your family, and they could be the ones that could follow your guidance. So you're going to have guidance. So you're not just giving power, you're also giving guidance. The other thing that I often tell people, I had someone joke at a seminar once and he said, can the trust fix the dysfunction in the next generation? And I think we all know the answer to that. The answer is no. There's only so much a legal document is going to do, right? We can't fix necessarily people who have addiction or people who have spending problems or people who have all these other problems, but you can put guardrails in place so that if you did have a beneficiary that had an addiction or had a spending problem or was involved in a lawsuit, where the trustee and your board can shut down distributions or make sure that they get the help they need, make sure they get the education they need. But a lot of the preparation needs to happen. If you're going to create a legacy plan, it needs to happen while you're alive. You need to train up the next generation. The legal document can't fix what you failed to do during your lifetime. Train up the next generation so that they're not entitled, so they understand that there's a purpose for their life, that they understand that work is important, that they understand good stewardship, and that it's really not ours. You're just given this wealth and you're inheriting it as a gift to use it for good purposes, to do good deeds, to help others, to make sure your family's taken care of, yes. But then beyond that, how can you make the world a better place? How can you enrich your next generation? So having a board of trustees and having your philosophy set out can go a long way. The third thing you're going to really want to do is have a trust protector. Have someone who, or a committee or a third party that has the ability to modify the trust after you're gone. Because once the trust is irrevocable, you want to have someone that can remove and replace the trustee if the trustee is out of line. You want someone that might be able to change things if the laws change. The laws are constantly changing. Circumstances change. You can build in flexibility. The other thing that you can do is you can give your beneficiaries what's called a power of appointment. Now, you can either give it to the protector and or you can give this power to the beneficiary when they die in their own will or trust. Let's say they had special circumstances with their children. They wanted to change how the trust went to their kids. If you give them a power of appointment among charities or descendants, they can essentially rewrite their portion of the trust. Another thing to consider is, are you going to have each beneficiary with their own separate share? So that when you're gone, this multi-generational trust is going to subdivide into a trust for Johnny, into a trust for Sally, in a trust for Raji, so that it breaks up into different provisions for the different children. This is one option. So I'll tell you about the Patel family. The Patel family were great stewards. They were engineers. They worked very hard. They were very successful. They invested their money. They also bought second to die life insurance so that the kids are going to be guaranteed not only to inherit assets, but they have a board of trustees, they have their trust protector, they have everything built in place so that their children are going to be taken care of, and they've got guidance, and then they've got flexibility so that the life insurance is going to fund them, and then the children can then get life insurance on their lives. Some people like to set up the trust so that it's an opportunity fund, so that you're not just giving people money, you're giving them an opportunity. You're giving them an opportunity to have a business idea, to start a business. Maybe you're just giving it in loan form where they have to pay it back. Maybe they're still going to get certain assets or they'll get money for a down payment, but then they have to go on their own and be industrious and produce wealth on their own. And the opportunity fund is available for them to do that. And if you do it in a loan form, then they would need to pay the loan back, and you can fund the payback if they aren't able to pay it back during their lifetime. You can fund the payback with life insurance on their life. This is sometimes called the Rockefeller methods because the Rockefeller family allegedly has done this to perpetuate generational wealth across the generations by requiring the trust to get life insurance on each successive generation of beneficiaries. So that's a really interesting idea, and I have clients that have implemented this family bank concept, an opportunity fund concept that's funded with life insurance. The other option, besides having the trust divide into individual silos for each beneficiary, is you can have actually a dynasty trust where generation 2 are all beneficiaries and it's in one common trust. And maybe they only get income. So imagine the trust and the wealth that you built is your golden goose, and your golden goose lays golden eggs. The generation 2 only gets the eggs. They don't get to touch the goose. So that guarantees that the goose is going to be there for generation 3. Now, some people don't want the whole goose to be untouchable, so they might do a legacy set aside, and they might say a portion of our golden goose can't be touched, and that's a legacy that we're setting aside for generations 3, 4, 5, and down the line. And that's a wonderful way to structure it. And then you can have parameters around, what if generation 3 has no children? Then they could have a power to appoint it or a power to access those funds. So there's flexibility that you can build into it, but you can set it up in such a way so that you've structured the trust so that potentially there will be resources that are going to last. And then you're avoiding the statistics with a really good trust structure. And then, of course, you have to educate and train and have the successive generations train. And you can do this with family wealth retreats. You can do this with planned conversations with your children and grooming them and getting Roth IRAs for them, and then having them set up things for their children, having education funds for the next generation. And so oftentimes generation 1, 2, 3, they're going to carry on the wisdom, the guidance, the values. You want them to carry on the values because it's not the money that leads to success, as we all know. Like, you could receive an inheritance, but it's not the money that leads to success. It's the wisdom. It's the value. I think in Proverbs 8, it says that Wisdom leads to enduring wealth. You want wealth that endures. You want your successive generations to have wisdom. You want them to have wisdom from on high, and that is the only way to guarantee that we're going to have generational success. But you can still go a long way with the trust structure to help them be successful by setting things up with a good trustee or board of trustees, a good jurisdiction, discretionary guidelines that follows your philosophy and your view about money, a trust protector that can change things if circumstances change, potentially giving your children a power to appoint. These are all mechanisms where you can build in flexibility, make sure you've got dispute resolution mechanisms, and that you can also have your wealth manager involved with an investment philosophy so that the assets aren't squandered. Things are probably going to evolve greatly with our economy and with cryptocurrency and with digital markets, and things are going to evolve over time. So the more flexibility that you can build in, but that it aligns with your philosophy of hard work and investment, the longer your trust is likely to endure. All right. So hopefully you've learned a lot from this episode. Be sure to share Legacy Maker like this on YouTube, podcasts, Spotify, everywhere that these are played, so we can continue to bring you more content. And be sure to comment. What do you think is more likely to lead to failure? Was it a poor trustee? Was it lack of trust protector? Was it lack of distribution standards? And so here's some takeaways for you. List some assets that you think are likely to outlive you. Identify who you want to control decisions. Draft a one-page distribution philosophy. Set out your philosophy around money. What led you to build wealth? What are some of your lessons and wisdom around wealth building, business, entrepreneurship? Studies have shown that people that are entrepreneurial and have the mindset of an entrepreneur are less likely to squander wealth. They're more likely to produce and grow and to continue to perpetuate the wealth. Decide whether you need a trust protector. Create your investment philosophy. These are all things that you can do and incorporate into your plan so that you are a legacy maker. It's been so much fun to be with you today. It's Kristina Hess, and until next time. Thanks for joining me today. When you're ready to take the next step, connect with us at legacymakerpodcast.com. And until next time, stay wise, stay intentional, stay a legacy maker.